Welcome to Some Guy's Garage. I have a couple of new vices in the garage today. And no, I don't mean vices as in more tools, I mean actual vices. And these in particular are 3-inch clamp-on vices. And what it means by clamp-on is they use a clamp here on the back side to attach these to a work surface or otherwise. That's unlike a larger bench vise here. This is a 6.5-inch Yost that I've had since I built the workbench here and has been a really good solid vise. So unlike these, which are permanently mounted and quite large, these vices are a fair bit smaller and more portable, so you can use them without permanently mounting them to a workbench or similar. So I've wanted one of these for a while just so that I can use it away from my primary bench when I'm working on other projects. Sometimes I need a vise to hold on to something and not coming up here to the garage to do that. I'll be able to use one of these in its place. I picked up two because they were only 30 bucks each, so nice and cheap, and decided I would have a little bit of comparison here. This is a Yost, like my larger vise over there that I just showed you, and this is an Irwin, so an Irwin record vise. And they both look very similar in their build and design and functions, but there are some key differences here that I'll show you in a minute. But first, let's start off with a few measurements. So looking at the clamping mechanism, there is a 2-inch clamp on each one of these, so this will clamp onto up to a 2-inch thick work surface. That'll work well with something like a 2x4 or a 2x4 with 1/2-inch plywood on top, something like that you'll be able to clamp onto, which is really convenient. The jaw opening itself is 2.5 inches on both of these, so you can see there 2.5 and 2.5 inches. And then if I turn these around here and look at the top side, they are, like I said, 3-inch vises, both of them here, so 3 inches this way. So the other critical dimension is throat depth, and this is about 1 5/8 at maximum, as well as this one. So they are, in all intents and purposes, the same dimensions. So let's get these clamped onto a work surface here, and I can show you how they operate. Starting with the Yost here, just slide it on, and then clamp it down. My work top is 1.5 inches, whereas the vise was at 2 inches, so a little bit to adjust here. But there we go, the Yost is clamped down, and we'll do the same with the Irwin. Okay, there we go, they're clamped on the workbench, and here's where the differences start to show up. The Yost is very smooth, so one finger, no problem, just keeps going. There is a little bit of play in the jaw, you can see there, but it's fairly solid. The Irwin, on the other hand, the adjustment screw is very stiff. It's not very comfortable to do it with one finger, although you can. It's definitely not the smoothness that you get out of the Yost here, where you're just quickly spinning it open. This one takes a little bit more force, although the trade-off with that is the jaw is a little tighter, so you have a little less play in it. So the other thing about the Irwin that is not as nice as the Yost is the casting itself. I don't know if it'll come across on camera here, but the jaws are out of square, both this way, so the tilt left and right, but also this way as well. And just to show that a little better, I'm going to throw my level on the bench, and as you can see, my bench is pretty well bang on level. But if we put that onto the Irwin vise here, and you can clearly see it's way out, and that's not because the jaws are moving or anything like that, it is just really off. The back jaw is a little the other way, so it actually makes it even worse when the two jaws are apart. Whereas the Yost is pretty well bang on level in the front jaw, and maybe just a little bit out on the rear jaw, but not too bad. Not nearly as bad as the Irwin is. And some of that could be down to the fact that the Yost, as you can see here, is all machined, whereas the Irwin is just straight casting and then painted over. So this is probably straight out of the cast, maybe with a little bit of work before it gets painted, whereas the Yost is actually fully machined on all the surfaces. Not only the jaws, so they are smooth jaws, but it is machined on the inside, whereas this is painted on the inside. And then also the tops of the jaws are machined, they're not here, and even the little anvil here at the back is machined, whereas the Irwin's is just painted. So there are also a few other details that make the Yost a nicer vise than the Irwin, and I'll just pull them off the bench here, I'll unclamp them and show you that. So the other things to notice, the bars here actually have some overspray from the paint on them, whereas the Yost is clean, and probably some of this in the casting also has something to do with it, just the amount of cleanup they did on the part versus the Yost, you know, not just the machining, but all of the general pieces. The other thing you'll notice, this is attached with a roll pin, nothing wrong with that, in the screw here with a small washer at the front. The Yost, on the other hand, uses a C-clip, so there's a C-clip here, and you also get a washer here on the front of it, which helps with some of the thrust forces when you're tightening and loosening the actual jaws. And there are other little minor differences too. So the handle here, it's actually a little bent from the factory, but is a thinner metal than the handle that is on the Yost, although it's slightly longer here and slightly shorter here. But practically speaking, you're never really cranking down on a vise like this like you would on a full-size vise. So less matter on the handle, but more that this one is a little weaker, this is a little stronger, and this already has a bend in it. But you can just tell that the fit and finish on the Irwin is not nearly as nice in all different aspects compared to the Yost. And just while I have them here, the one other feature I haven't mentioned is they both do have pipe jaws on them. So inside here, you can fit a round pipe, so 1/2 inch or so round pipe will fit into the jaws here or here and gives you another way to grasp round objects. These are both just cast-in features. There's no machining on either one, so for all intents and purposes, they are pretty equal in terms of capability in that sense. Anyway, just to show them clamping, I have a small 1-inch square tube here, and we'll tighten those down into each vise and just show you how they grip. So tightening all of this all the way down here. And you can see there, not a great grip on it. Wiggling a bit there, wiggling a bit here. So has a decent enough grip, but not the tightest. And then we'll do the same with the Yost here, so we'll tighten this one down. Again, I can't believe how much smoother this is than the Irwin, but we'll get that tightened down. Jaws here, make sure these are both snug. And yeah, same sort of thing where the pipe, if you really lean on it, will move. But in general, just for enough grip to be able to, say, drill a hole in this or something like that, this will work really nicely for it. And then we'll just grab a little block of wood here as well. So open these up. It drops in. Tighten that down. And pretty good grip on a block of wood. Not going to move. Enough that if you needed to drill it or whatever, you'll be able to hold onto it with this and it'll stay put. So we'll do that, and the same in the Yost here. Tighten that down. And then again, fairly good grip on the block in the Yost vise as well. So for simple jobs where you don't need a lot of gripping power, either vise will do the job. Although certainly the Yost here with the machine jaws has a bit more of a square grip on the block of wood or the steel tube that may be of some benefit. The other thing you'll notice is once they're closed, just how square this is all across the faces of the two jaws. Like they fit together really nicely. But then on the Irwin, you can see just a little bit of a gap on this side as the jaws don't close up perfectly square. And the other surprising thing with all those differences in the poor build quality of this, you'll be surprised to learn that the Yost is unfortunately made in China, but it is made in China, and the Irwin is made in India. Typically everybody thinks made in China means that it's not good quality, but in this case the Yost is clearly the much better made vise, and given the same price, there's no excuse for the Irwin being that poorly made, with the castings being off, with the simply coated jaws rather than the machine jaws and overspray and things like that, bent handles, etc. You would really expect that the build quality of these two should be very similar from reputable manufacturers, but it's quite clear that Yost put some extra attention into this to make sure the quality control and the fit and finishing is just that much better on their product. Anyway, at this point, I think the Irwin is going to get returned. I'm going to keep the Yost, and this will be added to my kit as a nice little portable vise that I can use away from my main bench here. If you have any questions about either of these vises, let me know in the comments below. If you aren't already subscribed, please consider it. And as always, thanks for watching.